extraordinary, wonderful artist and producer, Jesse Wortham. Uh, I'm the executive artistic director of Actors Theater, and we're getting to talk about Erma Bombeck at Wits End. Thanks for joining us. Hey, Jess, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you, Robert?
I'm so jazzed about getting to share this with the world and all the great work that you did in front of the camera, behind the camera, and really look forward to getting to talk about that whole enterprise. What was, first of all, let's just talk a little bit. I'm just curious about when you first kind of got the script.
Uh-huh.
Uh, did you have any idea what we were in for, what we were going to do in capturing this in quarantine?
No, none whatsoever. You sent me that script. I read it and I was like, okay, yeah, I see this great. And you're like, yeah, we can just, it takes place in your home. We can just shoot it in your home, and you've got kids. She has kids. If there's stuff around us, it's fine. Easy breezy.
And then we
and
did it. We started doing it.
And we had wonderful discussions surrounding it before in pre-production, before we actually got into the nuts and bolts of getting it in the can. I think for me, and I think we've talked about this before, like just learning all of the different platforms to make this happen when you're shooting in quarantine. I think a lot of people that I've talked to about this didn't realize. They're like, so your husband was running the camera. And I'm like, no, he was taking care of the kids because you can't film something like this with, twin toddlers running around.
Right.
A clean take of anything. Yeah, I think that's, I hadn't anticipated what being, a one-person crew was all going to entail. Like, I just didn't, my biggest concern going into it was like, oh, it'll be so weird to like not be in the space with Robert and to like, get runs of the whole thing in one piece. That's going to be weird. Like working out of order is going to be a little weird. Even though, when we rehearse plays, if it was a play, we would probably rehearse things out of orders, but we would get runs. We would have like the whole, I would get to, get on and experience the whole arc of the piece. So that, like, going into it, I was like, oh, that's going to be strange not to have that. I'm not going to feel like I really have a grip on it. And then we got into it. And what was the hardest thing was having to make that switch of getting sort of like the visual direction from you on like, this light needs to be here. We're getting a weird shadow back here. Can you try moving it at maybe a 45-degree angle instead of a 30 and try the light at this setting as opposed to this? And then, we, in the early days before we figured out a more efficient working method with Zoom and what was that?
Remote.
The remote and the reflecting program that we used so that you could actually see me when it was live. Early on, we were literally doing a take.
And then, like,
seeing it, and I was like,
send it to me? We've had the great pleasure of having Jesse serve as one of our artists in residence starting from the summer. And so Jesse's all over our digital season. Jesse, can you talk a little bit about how this was an evolution or different from working in some old media, working on a radio play where it's all voiceover? We also did, you had a stunning kind of work that you did in The Stronger, where at that time where you were filming on location in your car, near a coffee shop. Like, how was this in terms of the evolution? And, now we're having the thrilling opportunity to kind of work in post-production on your beautiful work in Romeo and Juliet, Louisville 2020. What's the evolution of working in quarantine, working remotely, creating, and has this felt like an evolution or just an entirely different experience than the others?
Yeah, I think it's funny, you talk about evolution, you were talking about like the radio play and then shooting on location in the car and then having the whole house to do Irma. It's like I went from recording a radio play in a closet to recording the COVID classics in my car, so a little more space, and then having the whole house is a luxury for Irma.
At multiple houses, we might get to add, yes.
Yeah, we get down to the basement, everywhere. I think the biggest evolution for me was like learning how to, because I'm such a people person and I really thrive off of energy and conversations in a room. The hardest thing for me was like not having a dedicated space to go to do the work, and having to live with the spaces that have been dedicated to my home life. And the separation between the two didn't always exist. It's like I'd be cooking dinner in there, in the kitchen and be like, oh, this might be a good, and noticing the light and being like, oh, this is probably a time where we should shoot some Irma in here because the light's coming in.
Yeah.
So it's sort of reevaluated how I'm looking at my living spaces. But
wow.
As far as like the evolution of how to approach the work, I really thrive off ensemble work. And so this is so hard because normally when you're doing like a one-person show, your acting partner is your live audience.
Right.
And that feedback loop of getting to hear a response or to just feel the listening, which is a real thing as a live performer, wasn't there. So it was really an exercise in putting all of my trust in you, Robert, as one person.
Dangerous, so dangerous.
No, but it really was. It's an exercise in really like fully investing and trusting in your collaborator, singular as opposed to plural. But obviously we had more collaborators on the radio play, but just learning how to work and how to modify my process as an actor for each of these mediums and in sort of quick succession, and how to take care of myself and my space, and finding how to let the work go when the work is living in your home.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Wow. Like that's a difficult thing for me because it's always there, because I'm always seeing either parts of the tripod or a random prop, or being able to separate the two was also a journey. Not feeling like I always should be working on it because it's always there and available. And I wonder if that's not an issue for multiple people who are working from home now, not just artists trying to produce work inside, in their home, but everyone trying to do their work inside their homes.
Sure. What are you how has it been working primarily as a stage actor? What's it been like to have see or get your work reflected back through different platforms and different mediums? What's that been like for you?
So I'm not a person who really likes to watch myself. It's hard for me, which is why I think I tend to gravitate towards more live theater, that and the feedback with a live audience. I've gotten really, I would say, comfortable isn't the word, but I've just gotten inured to seeing myself at this point after filming all of these things and having to look back at it. That and like, if I'm checking like Instagram or something, I'm seeing myself in the promo video over and over again. So I'm becoming much more used to that. It still is a little weird for me, but it's been a learning process on a lot of levels, both technically, but also just learning to not be as precious about myself and the work. Like there's so much repetition involved in the work, and not feeling like everything is the end all be all. It's also helped me when I'm taping my own auditions now at home. It's like, I'm going to do 3 and just go. I'm not going to obsess over it. I'm not going to try to make everything perfect because that doesn't exist. And to just allowing myself to sort of release into just being with the work as it is and trusting that it's there. Yeah.
What's it like to have the balance of obviously you were acting before you became a mother and a wife. What's it like? I hear the balance part of that, and certainly working in capturing in quarantine, capturing remotely, has its own very specific challenges. But what have you found has changed in your process as an actor? And can you talk about this burgeoning expertise that you're finding as a producer?
Oh, that's a big
What that's
question,
been
Robert.
like?
Well, sort of very, very quickly and very early on in our process, specifically with Irma, I realized it wasn't going to be just, I'm going to learn my lines and be ready to go. It was like, yeah, you need to learn your lines, but you also, a lot of line learning is like learning them sequentially. And I knew that actually wasn't going to serve us because we were never going to do it sequentially. So I didn't have to build those bridges between the moment to moment work, because that was going to be basically happening in post, essentially. So trying to figure out, I spent much less time working on lines and approaching this, and much more time being like, oh, what are these activities? What's the visual landscape of this piece, as opposed to how does the language move it forward? Which we've talked about this before, how theater is much more of a language-driven medium, and film is much more of a visually driven medium. And how do we keep this alive and active on a screen, here, where the audience doesn't have, I mean, I guess they do have the opportunity to stop and kind of pull back and just look around their house. But in the theater, you would stop, you have the option to stop and pull back and sort of take in the set and look at how other people are reacting, which we don't have here. So trying to go through the producing work of figuring out the schedule and what rooms we were going to be in for the best light, using a lot of natural lighting. It's actually work that I really enjoyed because I liked problem solving. Normally you're problem solving with your character. You're trying to like discover all of, the ins and outs, what makes them tick, how they get from moment to moment, what that journey is. Here, this kind of allowed me to sort of just literally work moment to moment and not worry about how I get from here to there, because that's going to be taken care of in post. This was about, how do I make this run the most efficiently for our time, because it was so precious, because you do a zillion things, Robert. You're like running a theater company, you're teaching, you're doing a podcast, you're directing other shows. Meanwhile, I'm just trying to maintain sanity with twins and then do this work in the evenings when they're
like, that's a small task. I mean, oh my gosh, you're shaping lives. Oh my gosh.
Well, you're shaping lives and culture. So
very generous.
Knowing that we only had 2 days a week to devote to this over, I think we did this for about 12 weeks, was really trying to make it run as smoothly as possible, so that you and I didn't have a lot of like, that's great, now what? It was like me doing a lot of pre-planning. It was less like running the lines and more like, how do I make sure that this runs smoothly and puts us both in the best position to do the work when we get there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you did such an extraordinary job. We've got a great question. Judah Maria Hellman asked, how difficult is it to be funny in a one-person play?
Well, the material always helps. And Irma's given us great material here. Working on comedies, so funny in a one-person play. In the play, if you're doing the play version, the live in-person version, I think it's a lot easier because you learn your audience. And like I was talking about, that feedback loop, you understand as you're performing what this specific audience, and it will change night to night when you're doing a live performance, what is landing and what is funny for this audience. I don't know if I'm funny in this because it's like me is just like a lot of, comedy comes from truth, right? We laugh at things when we recognize it as that is true, because it strikes a nerve and a chord. And so for me, a lot of times, because I wasn't seeing as we were filming, I didn't have a monitor that I could look at to see what was coming across. And Robert, while I was filming, when he was able to watch me live, was obviously on mute because we didn't want to record him into the film. So for me, it was always lovely that once I once I would hear Robert say cut and then laugh, and he'd be like, that's it. Or he would still be laughing about some take. Then that helped me sort of like find what the vein of the funny was for that particular segment, which,
Right.
sometimes it's not funny, haha. Sometimes it's, it's just funny, haha, hit to the truth, a quick of an experience, right?
We got another great question about why this story now.
Aha. Do you want to talk about?
Well, talk about that New York Times article. Like we had a number of conversations, and at the center of that, we were certainly in the center of all the recognition of a matrix of oppression that was really fully expressing itself on brown and black bodies across the country, in the sense that the idea that we were really starting to see just how corrosive that there were communities that were, I don't know, Lee Edward Colston said this 2020 was a year certain white people discovered racism. There's some people who know, but I would imagine for women, the idea of like, there's patriarchy and there's misogyny, and how a woman and a mother and a wife navigates work, navigates those implicit biases that are rife in our society. And what does that have to do with the matrix of oppression? And does that have relationship to other historically marginalized communities struggling to have their humanity recognized and honored and mobilized into policies and practices that are inclusive and allow for full actualization and humanity? And we were talking about this, and then this Times article came out about folks working in everyone was working in quarantine, and how quickly the husbands were like, oh yeah, that thing that my wife does with the kids all day while I'm gone, started a new conversation about that piece. And you sent me that article, I think shortly after we had been kind of making these connections about various movements, liberation movements, history of that, and Erma's place in that, and her very specific way of navigating it as a woman from Dayton, Ohio, a woman with the social location identified as white and hetero, and some very specific ideas of who she was and where she was finding resistance and support for what she was writing and how she was talking about it. I don't know, there was just things about that were really fascinating to me. And I was like, this would be great to explore with Jess. And what you brought to it, I just thought was so, a number of things that I had seen in the pieces that I felt was really excited about exploring with you.
Yeah, what I love about it is I think, and this was also one of our early conversations around the piece, was talking about how, like, it's gentle humor. It's kind of what we all need now. But like underneath that gentle humor is a really hardcore issue of the value of quote unquote women's work, or what is it? Is it pink labor? Is that what they call it? Like the pink labor force, as opposed to the pink collar work. And so many things, some of the text of the play is pulled from her actual writing, and some of it is additional by the Engel sisters. But it's amazing to me how reading some of it, like just how prescient it is, and not just prescient, but like how little has changed. Like there's that one, there's a piece in there where she's talking about how her column is starting to take off, and she needs some more time without interruptions, which I think all of us working from home with children in the home and having to do their education in the home now are running into. She talks about how she needs a few more hours without interruption to do her work. So she starts interviewing domestic help. And she's like, guess what? no one wanted to get paid for what I was doing for free. And I think, like, has that changed? Like, we're still in the same spot. And her work with the Equal Rights Amendment, and how I was on WXOX earlier this morning, sort of talking about her what I would call quiet feminism. That what is so radical, and we had this talk about it, what is so radical about her isn't that she is, she's operating in the same time as Gloria Steinem and Bella Abzug. She's not out there like rah, 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 feminism. Yeah, she's not a loud voice. It's like catching more flies with honey. It's pointing out the work that is happening at home in a humorous way to hopefully comedy and laughter allows us to kind of crack open our hearts and receive harder truths or harder messages, I think. And working on this, and the fact that the ERA amendment still has not passed, the Equal Rights Amendment still has not passed. And piggybacking, I saw another article recently that talks about the effects of the pandemic on women in the workforce, and that basically the advances that have been made by women in the workforce in the past 40 years have essentially been now wiped out by the need for a person to stay at home and take care of the children who can't leave the house. That basically all those gains and women's for progress in the workforce and in the workplace has essentially been driven entirely back to when she started writing, because they don't make as much money. So if one person has to stay home, they're going to go with the person who has the higher wage earner is going to be staying and working. And yeah, so yeah.
There's a question in the chat. After Irma, what other character could you envision preparing for solo performance?
Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. I've been so focused on this. I'm going to be honest. I haven't thought, not thinking beyond a week. I don't know if this is like a byproduct of the time that we're living in. I feel like everything is so immediate.
You're living in the present.
You know what I would love to do, actually?
What's that?
Lucille Ball. A Lucille Ball. I think her being a producer, producing her own show, being someone who is a comedic genius, but also like a woman. I mean, she ran a production company. I think maybe this Irma work has just prepared me for that, Robert.
There you go.
We're
all about prepping you for your future.
There you go. Yeah, I think working on something about Lucille Ball and that whole being a woman producer in that time period, and which again is sort of like Irma, she was the primary breadwinner in a time that was just not the case for the vast majority of women. Yeah. There
was a lovely compliment in the chat. I don't know if we could bring it back up. Glinda basically said, if you're as funny in the whole event as you are in the promo, we will totally be laughing and enjoying your performance. Get ready, Glinda. You're going to be enjoying. What did you find surprising about? Did you know about Erma Bombeck? Did you have a passing knowledge or a deep knowledge of her, or what did you find in exploring through this piece, her life and times and work? What did you discover?
I actually didn't. I think I'm just young enough for something, actually. I'm just young enough to have sort of missed her as a writer, and I just didn't have the awareness of her. I knew who she was. I knew she was a humorist, and I didn't know that she worked with the ERA. I didn't know about that sort of her activism in a way. And just learning a little bit about her life and growing up, and just the drive. I mean, of course, it has to be there to be as successful as she is, but or was. I wasn't aware of all of the television stuff that she did. That she had, that she was having dialysis 4 times a day towards the end of her career, but nobody ever knew that. Just the intense drive that this woman had, and just sort of the videos that I have since, when we were, in pre-production, YouTubing all of some of her previous, her interviews or performances, and just how wonderfully adept. I think we think writers aren't necessarily as
Yeah, socially adept at
Yeah, and she's like a
being.
fantastic interview, like just so easygoing and just so able to take care of the interviewer. Actually, in a way,
Mhm.
I'm thinking of one specific example.
Yes.
Yeah, um, but yeah, it's been kind of it was really sort of a wonderful gift to be able to discover how somebody else in another time was making her art out of the home while raising children and still, and providing for her family. So I really didn't know a whole lot about her going in, or her writing. I knew that she was a housewife humorist.
Had
It's
you
so much
done
more than that.
had you done a one woman show before?
Nope. Nope.
Wow.
No, I've done a couple two-handers, but I've done several two-handers, but I've never done a one person show before. No.
Was there anything intimidating about that?
Everything is intimidating. Everything is intimidating about that. Um, uh, yeah, I think like, and on some level, like, because this wasn't, but we hadn't been able to do it live.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like this was intimidating in a different way than it would have been to do it live and every night
Yeah.
and in a
Yeah.
rehearsal process with just, um, on some level, this is gonna maybe sound terrible, but it's like I don't think that I feel the same ownership, even though of all the work I did on this piece. I don't think I feel the same ownership of this piece as I would as an artist, as I would if I was doing it 8 days or 8 times a week for a month.
That's
Like
yes.
I don't know how to explain that, but it's like because I'm not getting to continually embody and to continually take this journey over and over again 8 times a week. This feels very different. Like, and I also haven't seen the final cut of it, so I'm like so excited
Right.
to see what sound has been added. I didn't know that we were going to have like some little animation stuff, so like I'm really excited to see what you and Paul and Philip have sort of uh, the tapestry we have made together. I feel like I provided like little squares, and you all are going to do the amazing like stitching and piping and all that work to do it. So I'm really excited to see what that final product will look like.
Oh, I'm very proud of the extraordinary work. Nicole Walton says, "So excited to watch with mom. Thank you for bringing your amazing craft to us during these interesting COVID ways of working." Yeah, that's how we would describe it too. Kudos to you and actors for making it work and bring us joy. Kiss, hug, kiss, hug, kiss.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Nicole.
Nicole. We really appreciate your engagement with us and your support. We've got some extraordinary artists who have just done such commitment, and we have such amazing support. And I just want to say a special thanks to Brown Foreman for their support of our virtual season and the Brown Foreman Main Stage series. We absolutely could not do what we're doing without that incredible support. A special thanks to Delta Dental, our event sponsor, for these opportunities to gather in a virtual space. Erma Bombeck at Wits End releases tomorrow and runs for 3 weeks. So please find a link for the trailer and more information in the chat. And we're so grateful that you all joined us for this very special opportunity to just think about and reflect on this extraordinary process with the extraordinary, our leading lady, Jessica Wortham. Jessica, thank you as always for all of your generosity and your extraordinary creativity and rigor in your artistry. We're just so lucky to have you in our community and for us to get to see just your extraordinary work. So thank you so much, and thank you for your generosity of joining us today.
Thank you, Robert, for the opportunity to share it.
We'll see you folks next time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.